Well, thanks for tuning in to Outer Avenues TV. I'm here with Andrew Lewis, who is a local musician and Outer Sunset resident on the Great Highway, if you can't tell. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. So how long have you lived in the neighborhood?
Oh my God, 46 years.
Okay, so you just got here then?
Just got here. Feels like yesterday.
Yeah. What drew you to the neighborhood?
Well, my dad and I decided to buy a house together, and I was going to the Conservatory of Music at the time, and we wanted someplace relatively close to that, and we were looking around for houses, and he noticed this one for sale, and he saw the beach, and he said, all right, now you can go running every day. I was a runner, you see, so he bought this house so that I could run on the beach. And in gratitude, I've actually been running on the beach every day that I can since then.
So is that one of the things that keeps you in the neighborhood, is the fact that you run on Ocean Beach?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's like living in nature. It's right across the street from the ocean. My God, it's the best.
Right. So when we initially connected, you mentioned that you're a part of a few bands. What are they called, and what genre would you say they are?
Oh, the genre. Well, my band is called Deep Hip Pocket, and the genre is an African rock, jazz, classical kind of configuration, polymetric music. Hard to explain, but it's creative music. I write most of the music, and we've had 3 gigs. 2 of them were 22 years ago, and then I had to end the band because I went to have a family in South America, in Colombia, and I just started the band up. We just did our 3rd gig a couple months ago. And so that's one band. The other band I'm in is called Curious Planet, and it's a San Francisco jazz band. And I'm in a lot of bands, actually. I'm in the Santa Rosa Symphony. I'm the timpanist with the Santa Rosa Symphony. So I go up there once a month during the season. And I play with all kinds of groups and bands, just in freelance too, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
And what is your role in these bands?
In Deep Hip Pocket, I'm the leader and composer and arranger and producer and drummer and marimba player. In Curious Planet, I'm just the drummer. We work on arrangements together.
Okay.
And in Santa Rosa Symphony, I'm the timpanist.
Gotcha. And do you have a drummer that's sort of your inspiration or your favorite drummer?
Oh God, my first favorite drummer was Keith Moon. He was so great. And that was back in the old days, you know. And then so many drummers have been my inspiration. But I'd say my biggest inspiration musically was Tony Williams.
Tony Williams?
Yeah, he's my greatest inspiration.
Yeah. And where did you learn how to read and write music?
Well, first you learn how to play, and I did that in college. I started drumming, and I learned to read and write music at the Conservatory of Music. I could read a little bit of music because I played trombone as a kid, a little bit of trombone. And then I went on to drums and had to learn reading everything, treble clef, when I was at the Conservatory of Music.
And where was that located?
I was located on 19th Avenue in Ortega, right up the street. And then it moved downtown, unfortunately, and now it's part of the conglomerate of music buildings down there.
Gotcha. And where do you and your bands play?
Oh, right now, every Saturday from 2 to 4:30, we're playing on the Upper Great Highway at Pacheco. It's wonderful. It's outdoors, right above the ocean. And it's a kind of a jam session. A lot of Deep Hip Pocket members play there, and it's a wonderful thing. I'm going to do that as long as I can, every Saturday when it's nice, 2 to 4:30. And Curious Planet plays every Thursday night down at Octavia and Hayes in Hayes Valley from 6:15 to 8:30.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any Bay Area artists that also were inspirations to you?
So many.
Yeah?
So many. Sly Stone was my DJ on KSOL radio back in the 60s. He was my first big inspiration locally, but there are so many bands. I mean, I moved into town here in '65, We first lived in Marin, but the family moved here to Lawton Street, right down the street in 65. And right away we got into music here. I went to see all the bands every week, and they were all inspirational to me. This poster up here, the Moby Grape, they were one of my favorite bands. One of my most proud moments is one of my bands opened for Moby Grape a couple of times back in the 70s. And all the bands back then, the Sly Stone Band, all of them, the Dead, the Airplane, Santana, Tower of Power, we used to go see them all the time. So they were all inspirational,
Yeah. It's interesting how back then music really was its own culture, and now it's just sort of an accessory to life. How do you feel about the San Francisco music scene as it currently stands?
Well, it's hard to say. As you say, back in those days, these days music is like a commodity that you buy and you listen to, and they have the streaming service where it's song after song. Back then, music was an integral part of our life, our cultural life, and we identified with the artists, and we would commune and come together around the artists. It was our identity too. We'd go see them live, and we would wait for each album to come out, and we would get the album and put it on together, and listening to it would be a communal thing. We'd come together and listen and identify with it and shape our philosophy and attitude about life around the bands. And it was very different then. You had a very personal identification with not just the artists, but each of their products. And the products were not just songs. They were works of art. They were albums that you would put on. And you couldn't listen to this, shuffle music where you have one song after the other. The albums were an entity in themselves, where the progression from one song to the next was a part of the creation. So a very, very different experience listening to music then than it is now. Yeah, fundamentally different.
Would you say that the 60s and 70s were probably the peak for San Francisco's music scene? Or?
Well, it feels like it, doesn't it? We were the flowering of the generation that we thought was going to take over the world, and that love would truly conquer, and that we'd have a peaceful world in a short period of time. We were riding a cultural crest at the time, and the bands were our leaders in that, and the philosophy of the bands was what we gathered around and drew our inspiration from. And yeah, the whole music scene in the 60s and 70s was a flowering of artistic musical development similar to the flowering of Western European music in Vienna in the 18th and 19th century, where it was a culmination of artistic expression that focused in one certain area of the world where the artists would come, and San Francisco, in a way, represented that too in the 60s and 70s. Yeah.
Is there anything that you think that is special about the city that cultivated that scene?
Yeah, well, the Barbary Coast has always been a special place, where artists and thinkers, new art forms came to by virtue of being on the coast, and the traffic from the east, and the way it's kind of a center of gravity of culture, and rock and roll just came to it by virtue of the beat culture coming here, and the growth of that, and the spirituality of the times, and it influenced rock music. Rock music as a whole, from the 60s and 70s into the 80s, was this kind of focus of spiritual and artistic growth and flowering, and San Francisco had a very, very special place in that.
Right.
Yeah.
So another thing I wanted to ask you about in regards to San Francisco's music scene is, what venues did you visit back in the day, and are there any special memories that stand out to you as being particularly noteworthy?
Oh yeah, the venues were unbelievable. We moved to town, my older sister started taking me to the Fillmore and to the Avalon. As soon as we got here, every Sunday afternoon they would have concerts that kids could go to, so I was going to those almost every week, and There was one day where I was at the Fillmore and Grateful Dead were playing, and I was playing with a balloon. We used to play with balloons on the floor with the kids, with bad balloons around. One went under the stage, and I went to get it under the stage, and Bill Graham came up and grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and threw me out of the club. And
Bill Graham did that.
Bill Graham, yeah. And the club that was most outstanding in the 70s, into the 80s, 70s, was the Keystone Corner, where it was a familial kind of scene where we'd go hang out and see jazz, and they also had concerts on Sundays, and they would have the band and the public there and have jam sessions. And I got a lesson with Max Roach one day on a Sunday. Music was really different then. That the venues were open. You were a part of the community when you were there. The stars would get off stage and come have a drink, and we were all mingling. And now jazz music is off in the distance at the SF Jazz Center, where they come out on stage with their backstage passes, and we're all out here in the audience, and there's a distance. That music doesn't have the same sense of like a bubbling cauldron of creativity between the musicians and the public doing it all together. I really miss that. You don't see that anymore, especially now with the DJs and the canned music. Of course, you didn't have that back then. Music was much more alive.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you were closer to it. It was a community
Right.
that you shared.
It was an actual subculture, not just another part of life.
Yeah, not just a product that you went out and bought and watched from a distance. It was our identity, our life.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even before I was a musician. I mean, I didn't start drumming till I was in college when I was 17. But when I was 15 till then, going out every night, music was the most important thing to me, not just because of the sound of it, but because it was a kind of an ideological reference point, something that we grew with, and it expressed our sense of community and creativity together, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Had a different place in our lives
Yeah.
than it does now.
Right. So I think it's really cool that people can find your band on the Great Highway on Saturdays off of Pacheco. But what about online? If someone wanted to check out your stuff online, is there a YouTube channel or a website?
Yeah, I've got a couple of them. I'm a oldster. I don't know that stuff very well, but I'm working hard at it. I've got a deephippocket.com where my band is listed, and we've got our concerts on it. And I've got another one for my music business called rhythmsource.com. And I've got YouTube channels, Deep Hip Pocket playlist, and my playlist. But I'm new at all this stuff. I'm just getting going. We've got an Instagram. You can follow us on Instagram at deephippocket.com. Yeah, I'm working hard on getting that out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I'm going to make sure that in the description box below, the links will be there to where you can find all that stuff. And really appreciate your time today, Andrew. I'm sure the neighborhood does as well.
Well, I'd love to talk to you more. Come back anytime. Come see us on Saturdays.
Yeah, we'll keep that in mind. Thanks for tuning in to Outer Avenues TV, and I'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.